All right, guys, decided to do just a little project here since I kind of had some of this stuff out, and I actually just did a video where I'm on the hunt for a factory 4-barrel 55 air cleaner. As I stated in that video, I put my email address in there, but if anybody's got one and you don't want a whole bunch of money for it, I'd even take a little bit of a rough one to fix. But anyway, I don't care what year it's off of as long as the air cleaner has that look to it with the beads in it and stuff. I don't care about snout length and what actual year it's from. I just want that air cleaner. If it has a base, that's great. If it doesn't, I'll take just the lid if I can get it. But anyway, if somebody has one they're interested in getting rid of, email me and let me know. But anyway, I've got a separate video in front of this one. But anyway, I wanted to talk about valve covers and old school small blocks and stuff. There is something that you need to know, and I learned back in the 90s the hard way, and it was it was quite an experience to learn that. But since I changed the way I put an engine together and stuff with the components that I use, I haven't had an issue since. So anyway, let's get started. Now, with this 55 four-door I'm building for my wife, I'm trying to make the car look original. Now it's not going to be, it's going to be, you know, custom and detailed, but it's still going to look original with stock height and hubcaps. So the engine, I wanted it to look like an original showroom fresh 55. Now there's a few key components that is important to me to have to give it that original look. That is the 4-barrel air cleaner, and it is the Chevrolet scripted valve covers, and also the front oil fill tube on the intake manifold. Now, I have an Edelbrock Performer RPM intake here. It's not the air gap. This is an air gap that you can get your hand under. This is per regular Performer RPM, but they have the boss here to hole saw out to put in the front oil fill tube, which I did to my hardtop. So when I paint my engine Chevy orange, I'm going to paint this Edelbrock intake orange as well. So it has the look with the oil fill tube. So that's the three main components that I wanted to make it look original. Now I am running a later model 305 engine from actually the short block is from a 1988 SS Monte Carlo, which would have had center bolt style valve covers. I've got a set of 305 58cc cylinder heads from what I believe is like a 1980 or 81 Chevy pickup, so they have the perimeter bolt pattern, which is what I want for these valve covers. Now, in case you do not know, I know a lot of small block guys know this already, but there may be a few guys that do not know. When 55 Chevys came out, that was the first year production small block Chevrolet, 265 cubic inch. The cylinder heads on those engines had staggered bolt pattern instead of, you know, like the 70s and 80s or straight across. I'm not sure what year they started or switched from staggered to straight across pattern, but the early cars bolted on more inside on this part. I can actually show you right here. This is a pair of finned aluminum Corvette valve covers with staggered pattern. So you can see by looking straight on at the bolt pattern, the top bolt holes are inboard more than the bottom. So there are adapters out there on eBay. I found there's aluminum adapters that you can bolt to your perimeter bolt and even center bolt to run the staggered valve covers. And that is kind of what I wanted to do at first. I got these from my cousin Steve. He has a 55 Bel Air Tudor hardtop that we've been working on for a long time, and he had these. His father had passed away, my uncle. These were out of his barn, so these were his dad's, and his original idea was to hang them on the garage wall, and I went over and been working on his car, and I ended up getting these from him, and I was going to put them on the 4-door and do an adapter and all that. The reality is it says Corvette, and you know, to me, even though it's kind of period, I really wanted the original look with the Chevrolet script steel valve cover. So I contacted Steve just a couple days later, and I told him, hey, I've changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead and bring these back to you so he can hang these on his shop wall, because the reality is these were his dad's, and they've been modified here. You can see how kind of wavy it is right here. This has been modified a little bit. So they're probably, these valve covers usually are worth a lot of money, but with that being messed up, probably not. What are you doing, Kiki? You're right in my shop, bro. Need to go to the bathroom? You need to go outside? Is that what you need? Anyway, I contacted Steve and I told him I'm going to bring these back to him next time I go to work on his car, because the reality is, if I'm not going to use them, I don't need to keep them around here. But, you know, these were his dad's, and no telling how long his dad had these, no telling how many cars these were on. These need to be hung on his wall in his shop for his, you know, because of his dad. So I'm going to give these back to him. But anyway, that's the difference, is staggered or perimeter or center bolt. Now, with what I'm using is staggered pattern, which these are 350 heads. I've just got these out here for looking at them. But anyway, so I have the correct valve covers that a guy from try5.com sent me several years ago for my hardtop. I ended up getting another set that were actually in nicer shape. These, the flanges are kind of tweaked on a little bit, and one of them had a dent in the top of it. It might be the other one up there, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fix these up, fix the dents and everything, and fix the flanges, tweak them, you know, modify them with a hammer and dolly, and use them. Now, the one thing that I need, since I don't have a road draft tube, is a PCV valve in the valve cover. Now, I want to talk about that because this could get you into trouble like it did me. Now, back in the mid-90s, I fixed up a 55 Chevy car. I think it had a 400 in it. It could have been a 350, but it might have been a 400. So it was a, you know, 70s era or 80s era smog engine that would have had a PCV valve in the valve cover, which goes here, you know. But anyway, now I had a pair of Mickey Thompson valve covers, the old finned aluminum valve covers, and they had a hole in them, and there was splash shields underneath them. Little bitty splash shield that bolts on. It just comes down and kicks over and then goes right back up. Well, the sides are open. So I thought it was fine. Me and my wife took off for Branson, Missouri on vacation in that 55. It was full of oil when I left, which was, I want to say, is about a 3-hour drive to get down there. The next morning I come out and I pull the dipstick and there is nothing on the dipstick. So I freak out thinking, you know, a cylinder is messed up, like a ring's broken or something. So I ended up cutting our vacation short after one day and drove back home, which really made my wife mad. But anyway, I decided to pull the engine out and tear it apart and see what happened. Now, luckily, when I started taking the stuff apart, when I pulled the vacuum hose off the back of the carburetor that went to the PCV valve I had put in the Mickey Thompson valve cover, oil ran out of that. So I was like, what the heck? So anyway, I started pulling the spark plugs and they were soaked with oil. So what I found out the hard way is a splash shield does not work very well. Yeah, it may shield the splash, but when you're running high RPM down the highway, which in that car's case, I had the original rear end in the car, so it had a really low geared rear, like probably 410 or something. So anyway, going down the highway, the valve train's really working. The RPMs are up. So not only do you get the splash from your rocker arms, your push rods shooting it up out of there, but it basically turns into a fine mist inside that valve cover at high RPM. So this is nothing but oil mist in here. So what that shield was doing was, it was open on the sides, even though it was pretty close. It was just pulling the oil right out of that and right into the, you know, the vacuum part of the engine and pulling it right into and burning it. So anyway, I learned the hard way that splash shields do not work. The only tried and true is right off the GM engineered valve cover. This is an original, like 70s to 80s GM valve cover. This is the style of PCV baffle that they put in there. This is a stepped version. If you took this apart, there's steps in here, which makes it harder for the oil to reach the top. So this is the perfect baffle to put in a valve cover. And if you look at them really close, it is very simple. It is dead middle of your perimeter bolts right here, dead in the middle of that. So what I done on my hardtop, and I actually done it on a car before that, I think it was my 57 or a 56 Bel Air I had, I took a set of these Chevrolet scripted valve covers and I hole sawed a hole in it the same size as this one. That way it takes a factory style grommet. And then which I'm going to take a DA sander to the top edge of this. And when you sand this, you will see 2 spot welds on each side that spot welds that baffle in there. So I will drill out the spot welds in that baffle, and then I will plug weld that baffle. I will drill the 2 holes in this valve cover. After I drill the big hole, I'll drill a hole in the Chevy valve cover here and here on this one, and then I'll set that baffle in there, and I will plug weld that in there and grind the welds and then put a little putty on it. So I will have a functional, correct PCV system for my later model small block. I don't have a road draft tube small block Chevy. The older engines had a road draft tube that come out to vent the crankcase. I want the later PCV style system. Now this valve cover original, I don't know what's going on here. This thing is trash, but I always kept this because of that baffle. So I'm getting ready to use this baffle. Of course, I'll have to soak it in degreaser and clean it up. It is coated in old oil. But anyway, doing it this way does mess up your Chevrolet script. It's gonna, it's gonna remove the E pretty much, but I don't mind. I really don't mind at all. As long as I have a PCV system, I'm good with that. Now, another thing you need to know about PCV systems on these small blocks, you need fresh air in to the engine, and then you need dirty air out of the engine. Your PCV valve is the dirty air out. You need fresh air going in. Now on GM, they had the other side valve cover. They had a round tube going to the air cleaner. So that was the fresh air in, and this was the dirty air out. What I'm gonna do, which I did to my hardtop and I did to another car before that, is I'm doing the front oil fill tube in the front of the intake, and I will run this style of push-on cap, which is actually a breather. So this will be my fresh air in at the oil fill tube. The PCV is the dirty air out. Now doing it that way, you don't have to do anything to your other valve cover. You can leave it solid. It will still pull it from the lifter valley in between the push rods and all this stuff. So you're good there. Anyway, but that will put a properly working PCV system in my wife's car that won't pull a whole ton of oil out of the valve cover and shove it down my engine to make it smoke and use oil. So anyway, I realize a lot of you small block guys know that stuff and understand it. I'm just telling you, I learned the hard way, and sometimes that's the best way to learn. You only learn when stuff goes bad and you know what not to do. Now again, another one of my videos that, this doesn't matter to some people, but anytime I ever tell you guys something in a video, if I have personal experience in it and it works, I'm going to pass it off to you so you know. So anyway, that is how you would do a PCV system on your later model small block. So anyway, guys, I'm going to jump off here. I got lots more work to do. Thanks for watching. All right, so I took my DA sander to this, and you can kind of see a little bit of the factory spot welder right there. And then you can kind of barely make out this one right here. So I'm going to use a little punch, sharp-ended punch, right in the center of that spot weld. I'm going to smack it with a hammer to get me a little indent started. And I'm going to start out with a small drill bit and just kind of get it started just a little bit. And then I'll go to a bigger one and try to drill that. Now what I'm trying to do is drill that spot weld so I don't want the drill going through the baffle. I want to leave the baffle solid, so when I drill 2 holes in the new valve cover for the plug welds, I don't want that to be holes where that weld just goes through. I want it to be able to plug weld correctly. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do here. All right, guys, I lied to you. I decided against punching it and doing it that way. I'm going to try something. I tried something different. I think it's going to work out better. I just used my 2-inch 36 grit disc Norton Blaze on my angle grinder. I basically went in there and tried to grind down the valve cover just enough that I didn't hit the baffle underneath. And then also, if you're removing these, you need to grind this edge here as well, because I think when I did it last time I drilled it, but I just ended up just rocking it back and forth until it come out. But the flange for this is rolled under, and it's actually holding the baffle as well. So I went ahead and kind of ground around it a little bit. So I'm going to try to pull it out here. There we go. All right, so this is what a baffle looks like. I actually got a little thin there, but This is what a baffle looks like when you pull it out. Man, this thing is nasty. So I'm gonna have to soak the crap out of that in degreaser. But anyway, I'll clean this up, and on the other valve cover, I will drill, you know, the center hole, the same diameter as the factory was, and I will drill a hole in each side, just like this one had, to plug weld there and there. I may actually put a couple of plug weld or spot welds on this, and then just go back with a die grinder and clean it up, and then obviously I'll have to wash it and blow it out to get the stuff out of it. But anyway, that is how you put a valve cover baffle in an old valve cover. So just like that, and then you'll have a updated PCV conversion. Now, keep in mind, it does screw up your Chevrolet script, but that doesn't really bother me to have a grommet right in the middle of the E. I don't really care. I will say, if you got a pair of these and you notice you have two deals here, I want to say that, well, I know it's for wiring. I'm just not 100% if it was for your, you know, your alternator or generator or, you know, coolant temp sensor. I don't know. What I am going to do is use it for the alternator wiring. So I'm running a long water pump, so my alternator will be on the passenger side. So this is going to be my passenger side valve cover. So the alternator, you know, it's a pretty good size power wire that goes to the alternator and the exciter wire and stuff. So I'm going to use those for that. I'm actually going to look. I have a lot of valve covers here. I'm going to look and see if I have another one that has some of these on here. And if it does, I'm going to try to remove it and put it on back here. So it'll have, you know, 3 of them across there. But it's not a deal breaker if it doesn't have it. But anyway, back to work. All right, so I got out my intake that I'm using on the 4-door and these valve covers I want to modify to use. I also put my carburetor on, just set it on there, because if you're using a Holley, there is 2 styles that I have noticed for their big vacuum port, which I'm going to use for PCV. This one in particular is on the passenger side or right-hand side of the car. You know, sometimes they have them out the back, which this one doesn't have. It just has it coming out the side. Now, this carburetor might look big to people, but this is actually made up of a bunch of different carburetors. This is a 600 CFM vacuum secondary, and I have put a jet plate in the back without a power valve provision, and I used double pumper bowls on it because I was trying to build a carburetor out of a bunch of crap I had here. So I have the original base plate and the main body and the jet plate for the 600. I just modified everything else. Now, I originally had this extra from my hardtop because Demon and Holley is different. I had a Holley when I started, and then I changed to a Demon, and this part is different. So I ended up buying a whole new black braided fuel line system, and I bought a Magna-Fuel gauge for the hardtop. So I had this liquid-filled Summit one extra. So anyway, I was putting this on the 4-door. Now, I've ended up, I've got just the chrome-plated version, but it takes a screw-in fitting up here, a flared fitting, but it's chrome steel. I'm going to change that out to get rid of this because to me this is just, it's too modern for what I'm going for. But anyway, I'm going to be using a factory glass-style fuel filter up here and a hard steel flared line going to the fuel pump. So it gives it more of that original look, but it'll still be a Holley carburetor. I'm still going to run the gauge because that chrome fuel line set I bought has the 1/8" port there to screw this into. But anyway, I mocked this up to figure out where my PCV valve hose is going to connect, and it's going to be here. So when I put this valve cover on, I know that my PCV needs to go here. If I put it up here in this part, which I could, the hose would be a lot longer going to the front. I'd rather have more of the front of the engine look more clean than the back, so I'm just pretty much going to run the hose straight out to the PCV valve. So it'll have just a light curve to it because a PCV valve, you know, you can clock it. But anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. It's going to go right here in the H, actually. So now this right here shows you the after effect. This is the one I did for my 2-door hardtop. I went with later model grommet here. This is actually for like a 1990, early 90s, I would say, or mid Chevy pickup 350. This grommet is actually tapered. It's thin at the front and thick at the back. You can get these at O'Reilly's. They're just a few bucks. It's a Dorman. But anyway, it is wedge shaped. Now when you got your valve cover on your engine, it's angled, so that makes your PCV straight if you need it straightened. Anyway, this is just a regular parts store replacement PCV valve, and again, you can rotate that wherever you need it. But this is what a valve cover like this looks like converted to a PCV system. Now, it does screw up the Chevrolet script there, but again, I don't mind because I'll have the other valve cover that is not altered, so I'm good with it. Back to work. All right, so digging around in my small block Chevy junk down there, I found this old Chevy scripted valve covers that it also has the wiring tabs there on it. This thing is really, really rough. I think I got this from a friend of mine. It was laying outside behind a shop in a junk pile. Anyway, he gave it to me. I think there's another one. Yeah, there's another one over there too, but they're really, really rough. The flanges are really, really beat. They're dented all to heck, and anyway, I mean, they can always be fixed, but anyway, I've got a nicer set to use. So anyway, this one has the tab on it. These tabs are kind of unique. Now, you know, you could probably fabricate one, but they have a little folded tip edge on them, and the sides actually are radius just a little bit downward. I guess that's to not chafe the wire. So anyway, if I hand fab that to match, it would, you know, take a little bit more time. Whereas this one, this old valve cover, I sanded this a little bit with 320 and I found the spot weld right there. It has one little tiny spot weld. So I'm gonna take a drill bit just a little bit bigger than that and drill that out, and then I will plug weld this one to the front of that valve cover. That way my alternator wiring harness will go all the way up to the back of the alternator. So I think that's kind of cool. So anyway, I'm gonna get started on that. All right, so I got that little tab off there, and they actually had two little spot welds on there. As I started drilling one, I noticed the other one, but they're kind of close together. Anyway, this thing is a little bit tweaked out from being used through the years, so I'm gonna hammer this back flange down flat. I'm gonna clean it up really, really nice on the wire wheel, get it down to bare metal, and then I am gonna plug weld this one the same height as these are to that, and then I'll go back and I'll grind just the top of my plug weld so it's nice and smooth. But anyway, another one of them little details I think it needs. I don't know that many people go that far, but didn't really need to, but I had the stuff here, and the reality is I'm going to have the welder out welding the baffle in, so why not do this? It ain't going to take another minute or two to put that on there, but anyway, got to have my details. All right, so I got the third tab plug welded on, and then I ground the welds down. Anyway, some of them were, you know, kind of tweaked and messed up. So what I used was a piece of 5/16 steel line here, and I stuck it down in there, and then I just basically folded it around it so I can kind of get it back round a little bit. I'm going to leave them kind of wide because I got to be able to lay the wires down in there, but I doubt that I fold them up, so I'll probably leave them all out even because I don't really want to fold a metal tab into electrical wiring, even though I'll have loom on it. But anyway, that's how I kind of got them back straight, is putting that metal line in there for, you know, to get that roundness to them again. But anyway, now I got 3 on there, and I'm kind of glad about it. It's kind of cool. I'll give you a tip here. Well, first I'm going to say this one's not dead middle, which is really OCD bothering me. So I'm afraid that when I go to drill the spot welds out of that I might go through the valve cover, because I actually did it on that one. I was trying to save that valve cover, but the drill bit went through, which I could weld it up, but just in case you don't get the weld all in there, I don't want to have an oil leak seeping through my paint job. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it, even though it's not, you know, dead middle. I'm going to have to live with it. Anyway, when you're doing this little fine metal work like this, if you don't want to have to go back and prime and block to get your grinder marks out, like in my case, I ground down my plug welds, I always have 36 grit 2-inch blaze discs here for my angle die grinder there. But I've mentioned this several times through the years, but I like the 2-inch because when you get bigger diameter discs, the more they do this number at higher PM. So you'll get if you're trying to grind something, you'll end up with dips in it. I like these 2-inch because they're really stiff. And if you pay attention to what you're doing, just as that weld gets down, you know that's flat. So I will take that weld down usually about 80, 90%. And I have a few of these 80s here. Now, normally I don't have the money to buy a box of the 2-inch 36 and a box of 80s. That'd be like 70 bucks. So I usually just buy 36. But I do occasionally have some old 80s laying around, and I had one here. But anyway, that will remove the 36 grit grind marks. And then after that, I switched to a 2-inch Scotch-It disc. This is the red. The red works pretty good on metal. And then I finish work it with that, and that gets all the heavy scratches out. So by the time it's painted, it's nothing really there going to be noticeable. But anyway, there's that. Now, moving on, the next thing I'm going to do is drill the hole right here in the center of the raised part. And what I'm doing here is because I'm blind as a bat, I have to use readers, and these are just from Dollar General for $6, so they're not absolutely perfect. I can't see crap up close, especially little tiny numbers like that. So what I'm going to do is use this caliper, and I'm just going to figure out what size that hole is, which is pretty much that size right there. And then at that point, I will take, I knew it was going to be bigger than that one, but anyway, I've got this big step bit. It's a Harbor Freight special. And I will go through here and I will find the one that is, which looks like this one. So when I find that step that I need to drill that hole out, and that way it's true and round, I will take a blue, Sharpie, or red, whatever I got, and I will mark that flat part right there of the one I need. That way as I'm drilling, I can see that blue mark as it's spinning, and then once it goes through, I can stop. So anyway, the beauty of it is when you drill with that step bit with a Sharpie mark on there, usually when you're drilling something, it removes the Sharpie mark. So next time you get it out, you can do it again. You don't have an old Sharpie mark on there to screw you up and drill the wrong one because you had an old mark on there. Which, actually, I can see a red mark up here that I didn't get off there. But anyway, just a little stupid little redneck tip there for you. But anyway, I'm going to get to this. I'm glad I noticed this. I'm going to have to do some measuring here, but it looks like this hole is offset to one side a little bit, but the valve cover has an angle on one side, as does this one. So I've got to try to find that spot for that. But anyway, I'm going to get the hole drilled in there, and then I got to drill the two little holes so I can plug weld that baffle in there. Now I've got the baffle outside in a little cup. I've got it soaking in Purple Power. If you've never used Purple Power, that stuff, they're not a sponsor, but that stuff will degrease engine parts like nobody's business. It's really nice stuff, and I found a gallon of it at my local outlets for $5, man. So anyway, I recommend that stuff. Even though they're not a sponsor, I recommend it. Anytime you got inexpensive degreasers and they actually work, I'm going to pass it on to my other subscribers or viewers. Because I know a lot of you guys watching my stuff are in the same boat. You're in a garage, you're out in the driveway, you're on a budget. So if I can help out any way, I will do that. All right, guys, so I got this step bit here that I was going to do this hole with, but after checking it with the caliper, the next size is a little bit too big. So it's either too small or too big, so this is not going to work. So I used that other one that I had and I went all the way through. That way I know it's pretty straight to that point. So at that point I used my caliper to kind of get an idea of how much wider it needs to be. So anyway, I ended up using a fine tip Sharpie, and I pretty much just drew a circle around that edge that it needs. So I'm going to use a die grinder with a rotary bit, burr bit, and I'm just going to do it by hand and take it out to my Sharpie line, and then it'll be the correct size. So I took the grommet out of my hardtop here, hardtop's valve cover up there. just to make sure and check, because I wasn't 100% if that was the accurate size hole for this grommet. This grommet you see on center bolt valve covers, you know, like 87 and up stuff. So anyway, it has a wedge shape to it, you can see there. But anyway, so I calipered my hardtops valve cover, and it is the same exact size as that one, so it is the same. But anyway, so now I've got to go to O'Reilly's and get one of these in the doorman aisle. They're usually hanging right on the shelf. I do not remember the number. I wish I did. It'd be good to put in the video for you if anybody wants to do this. But anyway, basically if you go down there, tell them you got a 1992 Chevy pickup 350 half-ton, which I don't think it's going to matter what model of truck it is, but it's probably the same for Camaro and Firebird and all that too, with a 305 in it. But anyway, I'm going to get this ground out and then go check and see how clean my baffle is. Alright, so I got the main hole opened up in there, and then I've got 2 holes drilled on each side, and I've got the baffle in there centered in the valve cover, and I used needle nose vice grips on each side to hold that up there so I can plug weld these 4 holes. So I've got the welder turned down pretty low because valve covers are pretty thin material and it will blow out. So if you get it turned up pretty high, you're going to fry it. Make sure that's still straight before I do the other side. Yep. All right, let that cool off a few minutes and then I'm gonna grind it. All right guys, so I've got my fabrication done on my valve cover, and this thing, well, this one and the other one, I'm gonna strip them all down to bare metal, and then I will be using Z-chrome. When I Z-chrome the car, I'll Z-chrome these, and then I'll go back and block them out a little bit, so it should straighten up any of the waviness or unevenness that's on them. But anyway, I've got the baffle welded in. And my purple power degreaser that I have, I degreased a whole bunch of different engine parts. So that stuff is, I just kept pouring it back into the jug. So it's not as strong as it used to be. So it didn't really clean up that baffle super great, but it's clean enough. But anyway, so I dead centered it. Now when you do your hole here, you do need to pay attention to the center of where the valve cover is, because the top of it here is an optical illusion. This strip is actually it's pretty much not centered right here. So the hole, if you'll notice, of course, that's the bottom. I'm upside down of it, but that hole is a little bit closer to that side of the rectangle here. But anyway, that's all done. So when I Z-chrome it and block it, I'm not even gonna have to putty it. The Z-chrome will finish that out really nice. But anyway, there's plenty of room around it. I'll show you here. You've got, you know, the hole up and down, so my baffle is not going to interfere with any valve train stuff, just like factory. Now here's another thing that I'm going to give you a tip on. Now back when these cars first came out, this is about the style of a valve cover tab that they had. Now you definitely need to put something on your thin steel valve covers like this to keep them from leaking. But if you ever noticed, up through the years, GM changed the design to this style. This gives more surface area for the gasket, because running just these, usually your valve covers would leak. I don't like siliconing my valve cover gaskets on both sides. What I always do is I silicone the gasket to just the valve cover. This side I don't put anything on, and it always seals. I never have an issue. Now, if you've got valve covers like I do, that these flanges were pretty wavy and tweaked out, I am going to go to the parts store and get some cork gaskets. They have some that are double the thickness of this, and it works really good if you've got some tweaked out valve covers. So I'm going to go get a set of those. Keep in mind that will raise the valve cover up off the head more, so you know, if you got really short bolts, they may not be long enough. The ones that I'm going to be using will. But anyway, I have a full set of these from like a 1980 or whatever Chevy pickup, so I am going to use them, and all 4 of them on each head. But anyway, I'm happy I got the valve cover done. That's another thing out of the way. So to finish off having the Chevrolet scripted valve covers, I still have to strip them down to bare metal, and then I need to go get 2 thick cork gaskets, and I also need to get that Dorman PCV valve grommet. And I already have a PCV valve up here in a box, so anyway, so I do have to spend, I don't know, probably in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 20 bucks or so to get the gaskets and the grommet, but it'll be worth it because I got my Chevrolet scripted valve covers for my original look. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching.